So find the Bears a center in free agency. Who's out there?
I think the big name you're going to hear a little bit about is Lloyd Cushenberry. You saw Brad Biggs mention his name. I don't think Brad Biggs mentions names by accident. I think he's probably the best young pass-protecting center in free agency. Not the greatest player at the second level if you're thinking of a perfect run scheme fit for Shane Waldron, but certainly a good athlete, a former third-round pick out of LSU, was top 10 for us the last 2 seasons in pass pressure rate allowed as a pass protector. He's young. He's physical. I think that's your big name. And then I think if you don't go there, you just go to 2 pretty obvious, pretty easy connections. 2 guys that played for Shane Waldron. The first being Evan Brown, who played in Seattle this past year. Another guy I like probably even more than that is Coleman Shelton, who played with him for the Rams a couple of years ago. A guy that can play guard, can play center, is good at getting to the second level, backside blocks and in space is a good athlete. So the connection's there, or you kind of take the bigger swing on a guy like a Lloyd Cushenberry.
Is Cushenberry the one coming off an injury?
No, he missed about half the season in 2022. This past year, he played over 1,000 snaps, which is what he also did his rookie and sophomore year. So, no, he's largely been very, very durable.
Now that we know what the cap number is, what are the rankings as far as who's got effective cap space?
Yep, so the Bears are still top 5. I want to say they're 3rd or 4th as of right now in effective cap space. 80 in overall. You chop off about 12, 13 with the current draft class. Of course, the first overall pick and the 9th overall pick get pretty big contracts, and then got to fill out the rest of the roster. So still way, way up there. They don't have any proven performance escalators, which is these increased salaries, because guys like Kevin and Larry Borum, Khalil Herbert, no one qualified for the Bears this year. So didn't lose space for those different things. Obviously, a Jaylen Johnson tag would be about $20 million. But even after the tag, if they go that route, they still have a ton of resources to work with.
Brad, based on your calculations, based on all the data that you have, where in general is the best free agent money spent, and where is the worst free agent money spent by position?
Yeah, the data's pretty strong. You want to spend on the non-premium position. So interior offensive line, like we just talked about. If you're talking D-line, you're talking run defending edges, early down guys, or nose tackles, not your pass rush types. I think safety's always a good one. Off-ball linebacker you can do pretty well. You're not going to find – the simplest way to put it is, if a marquee tackle, receiver, or edge rusher, or obviously quarterback, is a free agent, there is inherently a red flag and a negative signal in the fact he's even on the market, because teams aren't letting elite players at premium positions leave. So I would say that at a high level. And then secondly, you can attack the premium position, so to speak, but more for rotational pieces, guys that fill a certain type of role, not, starter 3-down type players.
You mentioned Jaylen Johnson. Earlier today, Ryan Poles started off his press conference talking about Johnson, and he sounded as if they're very far down the road on an extension for him. From what you know of how he graded out, what you thought of how he played, and what you think the market is, what makes sense for a contract for Jaylen Johnson?
Yeah, look, it's going to be near top of the market. I also think there's a decent chance it gets done without a franchise tag even happening. I think they are fairly close. I think if you're Jaylen Johnson's camp, you have to come in asking to reset the market. Jair Alexander at $21 million a year is the highest paid corner in the NFL. That's a deal that's a couple years old now. And even ignoring the cap spike and all of those things, it's been a stagnant market, and you kind of owe it to your fellow position mates to try to reset that market and push it forward. So if I'm Jaylen, I'm asking for $22 million a year. If I'm Chicago, I'd love to keep it around the 20 number. I think maybe that's kind of your final numbers. All right, we'll give you 4 years, 80 type of range. He was the highest graded corner of all PFF this past year, and even in prior years. Even in some occasions where he wasn't super highly graded, he's a guy where context matters a ton. He is a guy that is taking on, massive roles. Obviously doesn't switch sides or trail against number one receivers, but is a lockdown player, doesn't get a lot of safety help over the top. Like, he's a guy they trust to have those very difficult matchups. And he's 24 years old still. Will be 25 in week 1. But, yeah, he is a clear-cut top 10 corner in the league, and his contract will soon reflect that.
Brad, how did Braxton Jones grade out this past year? Is he fine, Or are there players in this draft that you could see the Bears looking at and saying they could do better, or in free agency?
I think definitely not free agency. We kind of talk about that. It's nearly impossible to find a tackle. There's a reason why a guy would be there, injury question marks or other issues. So they're not going to be able to sign anyone, in my opinion, that it's a market upgrade that's worth the price associated there. Braxton Jones is funny. The way I put it is he's kind of the new Charles Leno, where I think people sometimes oversee. It's hard to find an average starting left tackle in the NFL. It's almost like the planet theory. Just like how many guys are walking around Earth that are 6'5 plus, 300 pounds plus, and are dancing bears that can do these things. I think the reason why I see the Charles Leno comp is, look, against speed to power, against the bigger, more physical pass rushers, Braxton Jones can get beat. Guys can get into his chest and push him back a little bit. But he's a phenomenal fit in this run scheme, in my opinion, and I think he does pretty well against the kind of bendier, more finesse, speed type of edge rushers. Look, Myles Garrett, it was not a good matchup, but it's not a good matchup for anyone. So I think he's an above-average starting left tackle on a fifth-round contract. All of that said, if they're sitting there at 9 and a Joe Alter and Olu Fashanu, the two top tackles in the class from Notre Dame and Penn State, I think they probably consider it. But if I'm them, I believe in the continued development and growth of Braxton Jones.
As much as we talk about a quarterback being on a rookie deal, allowing you for some luxuries elsewhere, if what you're saying is true and you're not paying premium left tackle money, how compartmentalized is that as far as best NFL practices? Does that affect what you only pay other offensive linemen because you look at that as a single number? Or does that give you flexibility anywhere else in your roster?
It's definitely both, but I think it is a thing teams do where they say, how much do we want to allocate to an entire position group? So, we know they paid Nate Davis a solid guard contract, lower middle tier, and then we're talking center. If I'm them, I do say we have a rookie contract right tackle who we like a lot already, and he's 1 year into his deal. We have a rookie left tackle, or rookie contract left tackle who's 2 years into his deal. Yeah, you know what? Do we always want to spend a lot at center? No, but in this scenario with that context, we'll make a splash there. We'll get a veteran, to come in and work, and whether it's a rookie or whether you want to help Fields get back on track, whatever. Don't force him to work with a rookie that has to adjust to the NFL game. So yeah, it's fluid. It's not a hard, bright line rule, but they definitely do say, let's make sure, the allocation of resources is to a degree, kind of spread out across different position groups.
How do you feel about the running back position now overall when it comes to free agency dollars? And the reason that I bring it up is that I look at the Bears running back room and I go, it could really use an upgrade. Now, maybe you can find that in the 4th or 5th round and not spend a lot of money on it. Are there any types of contract bargains for players that you could see having a good year under Shane Waldron and depending on what quarterback they have in free agency? Or is that something now that you just turn over to the draft?
I'm actually at the point now where I think we've reached that inflection point where I now do think, not to use a Bears player as an example, but the David Montgomery, the James Conner, these guys that are getting these $6-7 million a year deals, they're better than that. It's just the market is so suppressed at all levels, the top level guys, and then of course the mid tier and down. I actually do now think I would rather than use a 3rd round pick or earlier than that. I'd rather pay a guy that I know is a good player. Maybe he's not great, whether it's lack of breakaway speed, maybe he can't play through contact all that well. Whatever his shortcoming is, he's a clear-cut, quality member of a unit, of a committee, if that's how you're going to go about it. I think we're getting there. Like a DeAndre Swift this year, a Zach Moss, or there are guys that I think you're going to sign for $4 or $5 million a year that are actually worth more than that because the position market is just so suppressed.
If, in fact, the Bears were in the market for a new backup quarterback, if they wanted to strengthen that room as much as certain people may love Tyson Bagent, who would be on the top of that list of a skilled, flexible veteran who isn't going to necessarily be a threat to any starter, but can more than get you out of a game or get you through a few games as a backup?
Yeah, it's funny. It's not going to be the sexiest headline or storyline of the offseason, but it's one that agents and teams I think find very fascinating is This past year was like the year of the backup quarterback. We had like 45 guys start games this year, and whether you had a Gardner Minshew that almost made the playoffs, or you were going through the Tommy DeVitos of the world in New York, like it dictated. I mean, I guess that didn't really dictate the Giants season, but with all due respect, like it mattered a ton, kind of how you allocated resources there. So I do think Minshew is a guy that maybe makes sense. We've seen he's probably a good mentor, good guy in the film room to work with. I think he brings a good energy. He's fun, like Chase Daniel wearing a costume, all that stuff, like trying to keep things light. I think he'll do it pretty well, get a pretty good deal. I think he's one. I think Jacoby Brissett is honestly an underrated player and a guy that really should probably chase a bridge option and maybe even start for a couple of games, but might have to just go the veteran backup route. So those two to me, kind of jump out as really, really good candidates for help a young player come along, or again, even help a Justin Fields just regain confidence and learn a new offense. Both of those guys to me are very, very quality backup quarterbacks.
I'm glad that Dan asked that question and that you responded the way that you did, because I think that the Bears quarterback room, regardless if it's Justin or Caleb, needs an upgrade, and they need an upgrade of a veteran quarterback that if they have to play, they can, but more importantly, someone that can help in the room. Like there is value in that. And I don't know how to quantify the value, but they can't go back into a season where their quarterback room is Justin, Nathan Peterman, and Tyson Bagent. It can't be that, Brad.
I'm with you. I really am. I think it's underappreciated. And like you said, sometimes it's hard to quantify. You argue, well, this rookie didn't pan out and become a franchise quarterback, so therefore there was no value. No, like for all you know, there are plays or series where the young quarterback saw a coverage or identified pre-snap a sim pressure or a blitz or something, and because of what the veteran said in the room, instead of getting sacked, he threw a 15-yard completion. Like that stuff is happening. It builds confidence and it also actually leads to on-field production. So yeah, hard to quantify. It is certainly a real thing.